is from Emre Yilmaz. He'll be speaking concerning his work on Elmo's World and digital puppetry.
Hi, my name is Emre Yilmaz, and I'm an independent consultant and freelancer in San Francisco, and I'm going to show you some new techniques we came up with to bring 5 furniture characters to life on Sesame Street. We did this work at SMA Real Time, a post house in New York City that does a lot of multimat and virtual set work and lots of work on kids' puppet shows. And to lead into this, I'm going to start by introducing the term digital puppetry, because I'm going to be kind of bandying that around a lot. So I wanted to, give you an idea of what I mean. And so what I'm going to show you is a series of unusual uses of motion capture, and these are all experiments we did at Protozoa. This project we originated at Protozoa. I'm going to start with stuff that's more normal, more stuff, uses you've probably seen before in motion capture, and gradually get weirder and weirder and culminate in the Elmo's World method. And again, this is all grew out of work we did at Protozoa, which is where I used to be. First up, you're going to see 2 characters. There's a full-body motion capture character performed by a human in a motion capture suit. That's Virtual Ed Sullivan. This is for a show we did called the Virtual Ed Sullivan Show for UPN. The slightly, one step weirder than that is the mouse, which is, also performed by a human being in a full-body motion capture outfit, but it's being applied to this peppy little mouse character. So one of the things that's unusual there is his posture and body shape aren't normal human proportions. Another thing, the client wanted it as close to cartoony as we could make it, and you can't do cartoony motion with motion capture, but you can try to do, a good homage to it. The performer doing that has to kind of exaggerate their actions and so forth. Here's another example. This is a frog, another example of warped postures. The red skeleton represents the human data that we're capturing live, and then the blue skeleton is, a real-time frog skeleton that we kind of hung off the red skeleton. Doing this is kind of a dark art, how to get these different proportion skeletons and minimize artifacts as much as possible. It's something we used to do a lot of at Protozoa. This is that character fully rendered. So I showed you 1 very traditional and 2 slightly less traditional uses of motion capture. Now let's get really non-traditional. This is, again, a person in a full-body human motion capture suit, but the right hand is controlling the head of a worm, the left hand is controlling the tail of the worm, and the feet are performed in 2 segments in the middle. This is a character by Dan Hanna, who was also at Protozoa, and used in his short Chocolate. So this is really more like puppeteering than acting. This is another case. Again, sensors on a person, this time only on the hand, but it's being used to drive this little hand puppet. So again, it's not your body you're performing. You're performing this virtual body. And in both cases, the worm and this, it's important not to be looking at your real body, but at the virtual body. That's why in both cases, you're looking at real-time feedback of the virtual character, in this case in a monitor. In the worm case, the performer wears a visor to see what they're doing. We did this hand puppet for a couple of web series, which is what you're seeing now. Both of these, again, you've got sensors on a body, but they're being used to drive a non-human character on the digital side. Now let's get a little weirder than that. Now we're not even putting the sensors on a person. This is sensors on a piece of foam rubber, actually a wrist pad. There's some Blima sensors on it, and it's being used to drive this little walking letter. The movements you get out of this are more like puppeteering than what you usually think of as motion capture. This is that in use on an animated short called Chocolate from the early days of Protozoa. And it's a whole series of them, layered in, about 10 of them performed. So that's another case of, we're talking, this is really more like puppeteering than, and this is another very similar example. It's a foam rubber tube with a bunch of optical motion capture dots on it. If you layer that 3 times, 3 separate passes, you can get, this slightly, it's really a puppet. So that's digital puppetry. And when I was asked to come up with, when we first started talking with Sesame Street about doing Elmo's World, Elmo's World is a show within a show on Sesame Street, and the idea is that Elmo has drawn his whole little world, and the furniture all comes to life on it. And Arlene Sherman, the executive producer of Sesame Street, wanted us to be able to do stuff like, well, have the drawer open and close and characters slide on and off the screen. But we thought it would also be nice if we could make the characters act like living beings with personalities and quirks and attitudes. They don't always cooperate with Elmo and so forth. And we thought it would be great to try some of these techniques we've been playing with at Protozoa to make the characters more like, full characters. And so, first I'm going to show you the specific method we used on Elmo's world, and you can see how it grows out. So we've got a foam rubber block with Polema sensors in it, and it's being puppeteered, and in real time the person is seeing what's, the character that's coming out of that. So this is a little drawer. One of the things they wanted the drawer to be able to do was act like a dog, and so this is the original test, and then we wanted to show them it acting like a dog. The drawer opening and closing is being done by a foot pedal that's under the desk, and you can't see that from here. But it allows the same puppeteer to operate the full thing simultaneously. And here's a few snippets of the final, the final result of that, what it looks like when it hits the screen.
Everyone's barking. That's right. Elmo can watch that dog channel. Oh, he wants Elmo to scratch his tongue. Scratch, 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 scratch. Thanks, TV. Okay.
And here's how it's integrated into the production on set. We're doing this simultaneously with the real puppeteering on the set.
Everybody, ring along with me. It's got a nice ring to it.
Oh, well, do you want Elmo to answer it?
No, I'll let the answering machine get it.
Okay, here we go.
What you just saw, it's being puppeteered live on set simultaneously with Elmo, and the digital puppeteers and the real puppeteers are interacting via the live composite that they're both seeing, so they can each see what the other one's doing. This is Jim Martin, who's a puppeteer and director on Sesame Street, and in some takes he'll be over puppeteering a cowboy or a banana or whatever, and then when he's not doing that, he comes and puppeteers some of the digital characters. He's playing with the door, having him kind of wander off the screen there and peer back in. There's a lot of kind of squashy, stretchy type morph targets and deformations on these characters to give them that feel. The door comes in at the beginning of each episode when Elmo first comes into his room for the day. Whatever, if the show's about bananas today, the banana comes in through the door, and that's the door's role in the show, is kind of introducing the topic of the day. So Jim always does that part of the show.
Oh, guess what Elmo's thinking about today?
Another character is the window shade. The window shade comes in a little later in each episode, and it's just one Polema sensor, and that's used to puppeteer the end of the window shade. The rest of the shade's motion is filled in with a mixture of procedural stuff and a bunch of expressions and even a smidgen of dynamic simulation. But the input method is just one sensor. Next character is the TV set. The TV set is two puppeteers working in tandem. It's a character with a TV set on top of a table. So one puppeteer is performing the table part with one foam rubber block, and the other puppeteer performs the head of the character with the other foam rubber block. The Muppet performers are used to working in sync, working in tandem a lot. Elmo himself, if they're performing the feat, can take up to 5 guys to do working together. So they're very used to that. It's second nature to them. Usually one puppeteer will lead and the others will sort of follow their lead. Here, for instance, the TV's peering one way, that's one block, and then the guy on the base is following, kind of goofing off and having to fall over and I gradually try to get back up and have a hard time of it. So that's how the TV set works. It allows them to give a pretty good, nice range of motion out of them.
Elmo really wants to learn more about babies, don't you? Where can Elmo learn more? Come on, TV. Come on, TV. Oh, you can do it. Okay. You okay? Come on, I'm okay. Come on, TV. That's right. Elmo can watch the baby channel. Are you okay, TV? Turn on. Good, TV. Now Elmo wants to find out even more about bananas. How can Elmo find out more? Yeah, that's right. Elmo can watch the Banana Channel. Good idea, TV.
The Banana Channel. Programming with a P.
That kind of circle motion
TV,
would be part
TV,
of
where
the
are
music
you?
that they're doing.
TV, stop growing. You're not a plant. Okay, be a TV. Now turn yourself on. Good TV.
The drawer is probably the most straightforward of the characters. He's one foam rubber block and sometimes some joystick and foot pedal contribution as well. We never got to use this jellyfish movement in the show. But
Elmo wants to know what else has babies, don't you? Let's find out. Oh, look. The Troll is crying like a baby. Oh, don't cry, Troll. What will make Troll happy?
the drawer developed this really aggressive
Elmo
personality
wants
after
to
a
know
while.
what else grows out of the ground. And what doesn't. Don't you? Let's find out. Oh, not again, Troll.
The computer character is a newer character, and he takes 3 puppeteers to do. He's the most elaborate of the characters, on 3 different foam rubber blocks and a couple of other devices as well, all, working in tandem.
You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got. You've got.
The computer crashed.
You've got.
Over here, computer.
You've got mail.
Now Elmo can get his email.
In that case, we actually also did the drawer and the computer simultaneously, so we could get the interaction right. I want to say that, with this process, you really need great puppeteers to pull this off, and the Muppet puppeteers are great at improvising and playing and trying things out. A lot of the stuff they do on the show, they came up with 20 minutes before taping. I mean, there's always a script and everything, but they often come up with little funny interactions and spontaneous stuff that they hadn't anticipated. This is a little bit of between takes, they're waiting for a light to be changed or something like that, and so they, they're just having a good time with goofing off with it and just seeing what they come up with. I felt like my job was to give them enough flexibility so that they could bring those kind of improvisational, playful skills to this. This is a case where we were doing a take. It was very close to the bye take. But at some point about midway through, it became clear that this wasn't going to be the bye, so it just sort of became a free-for-all after a while. A lot of the stuff with the real puppets ends up like that, too. is the case, again, waiting for a light to change or something like that, and the guy on the set and the guy on the virtual character are getting out some frustrations. The shape is just, playing with them a little bit. Then this is a case where trying to do a camera move and the character simultaneously, and it takes quite a few takes to get it right. And
ready? 1, 2. Is everybody ready? 1, 2. Step right towards camera. I gotta like it. Wait a minute. 1. Oh boy, we could go on straight now.
Anyway, it's overtime. Put everybody yelling.
the drawer loves to chase Elmo around. Poor little drawer's out of breath. Again, that it's, to pull this off really requires great puppeteers, and I wanted to thank them and everybody else who worked on this. We did this job at SMA Real Time. Dave Satin and Les Rudner, in particular, who run SMA Real Time. At Protozoa, Eric Gregory, Mark Scaparo, and Dan Hanna. Dan Hanna created the worm that you saw earlier, on the tape. At Sesame Workshop, Arlene Sherman's the executive producer, and Kevin Clash not only performs Elmo, but sort of supervises all the puppeteering on Sesame Street. And that's my email address if you want to contact me. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. How do you make the characters, the actual puppet going behind and in front of the digital puppets, and also the size relationship between the digital puppets and the traditional puppet? How do you make, walking away, getting closer, getting bigger and small?
The size relationship is a little tricky. I mean, they do a lot of Ultimat work on Sesame Street, where they've got someone on one set and someone in Ultimat, and then they're comping them together. They basically just eyeball it. I mean, maybe someday we'll do depth keying and stuff like that, but right now it's all just eyeballing it. And we do the same thing with the virtual characters. And with doing stuff in front and in back, we just pop the priorities, in the middle of the take, so they can see how it's going to look.
Using the foam rubber is excellent for the squash and stretch. Could you compare and contrast that to Henson's own mechanical performance system, which is you can't get squash and stretch from?
It is a somewhat different approach. I mean, I would think you actually could, you probably could get very similar motion out of mechanical stuff if you had. Yeah, I don't really. I like working with the motion capture sensors, but it definitely has its disadvantages. There's different places where each of them is strong. This worked very well for this. There's definitely cases where this wouldn't work, and you'd want to use a rig more like the Henson Performance Control System.
Following up on that, were there any characters that there was debate about whether to do Disney or
Well, there was never a debate to do them as real puppets, and but they originally had real versions of each of the characters. There actually is a real drawer. I was kind of shocked when I first saw it because I built the character without seeing it. But it's made out of wood and everything, and they were originally going to use that every time when they didn't need it to be doing much, and they had a stick worked out to pop the drawer in and out, and the TV set as well, and they were going to use that as a kind of a backup plan. But But once we started working with this, and it seemed to be going pretty well, so we basically never use the real ones anymore.
Hi. I'm not so good at shouting. Can you define the difference between performance animation, digital puppetry, and motion capture, and what the subtle differences are? Is one a subset of the other, or give us some enlightenment on the evolution of the terminology and how you think the terminology should evolve to better describe the art and the craft that it possesses?
Well, certainly all three terms have been kind of, bandied around a lot and defined different ways, and I think everybody who uses them probably has a slightly different idea what they all mean. I think of motion capture as just the technology. That's just my personal thing. I think of motion capture as the technology of capturing motion, and then what you do with it is a completely different issue. Then performance animation, I think of as a broad term for anything where you've got any kind of input from a live performer driving a character. It could be push buttons on a keyboard. It could be partly, it could be pre-animated cycles that are strung together with push buttons. I would still call that performance animation. Digital puppetry, I particularly think of as this particular branch of performance animation where the movement is specifically close to puppetry. I mean, I don't where it's like the kind of movements that a puppeteer would create, and where you really need a puppeteer's. To me, the place where I don't exactly know how to define it, but there's certain puppeteers are really good at moving something that isn't them. Taking something, not thinking this isn't my body. This is that my body is this other character. And that is a skill that not all actors have. There's a lot of really great actors who move beautifully and can't apply their motion to something outside themselves. And a puppeteer has that skill. That's really where I think of the line between puppeteering and acting.
Hi there. Some really good stuff there. Just a question: what is your preferred software package or packages for?
Well, we started this work at Protozoa, and all the stuff you saw at the beginning was work that experiments and stuff we'd done at Protozoa, and we had our own software called Alive, which was written by Eric Gregory and Mark Scaparo and a development team. And unfortunately, Protozoa is gone, and I'm not sure what's going to happen to the software. There's other software in that market niche now, and there's a couple of big sellers. I've played with a couple of them, although I haven't used either one in a production yet.
You referred to this thing about mapping a disproportionate skeleton to another skeleton, like let's say a motion capture actor to a cartoon character that has different proportions. You described it as a dark art, and I'm wondering if you'd like to elaborate on that at all, and maybe even talk about a related question about what software packages are easier to use to try to perform that dark art.
Well, I wish I could give a simple systematic answer. Basically, we found as many ways to do it as there were characters we had to do it on when we used to do a lot of that. With the basically application of a lot of constraints and custom. We did some custom programming sometimes. Usually, it was just kind of geometric stuff and constraints that we used to hang a new skeleton off of a human skeleton. But sometimes you had to throw in some dynamics or something to get it right, because sometimes the motion, you end up with a lot of artifacts sometimes if you do that kind of motion. Like the movement is coming off a human with its own physics, and it wants to move in a certain way. And if you warp that motion over, using just geometry and constraints, it doesn't. The motion ends up a little odd looking. But if you're careful about it, you have to do it very very much on a character by character basis and sort of use whatever tools are in your grab bag. But we used a lot of constraints in particular. Thank you.
That's it for this session. thanks for coming, and thanks for attending sketches in general. And thanks to our presenters.